Doctor may call 120/80 normal, but that number can still damage your cardiovascular system.
It's normal for your age.
If you're over 60 and you've been told that a normal blood pressure reading means you're healthy and safe, think again.
Many older adults have been told for years that slightly elevated blood pressure is simply a natural part of aging and not something to worry too much about. Because of this belief, they often leave the doctor's office feeling reassured when their numbers are described as acceptable or only mildly high. However, this common assumption may not be as harmless as many people think. Even when there are no obvious symptoms, this pressure can slowly harm blood vessels, strain the heart, and
This is what makes high blood pressure especially dangerous. It can progress quietly for years without being noticed until major.
You should not assume you are safe just because your blood pressure seems normal for your age. Instead, question outdated beliefs and pay closer attention to what your blood pressure numbers may really mean. For people over 60, accepting slightly high blood pressure as normal can be a serious mistake. What appears stable on the
This opening sets the stage for a deeper discussion about why better blood pressure control matters so much in later life.
To make this warning feel real, imagine someone like Margaret, a 72-year-old man who seems to be doing many things right. He stays active, takes regular morning walks, tries to eat reasonably well, and keeps up with him routine medical visits. Her blood pressure tends to stay around 135/85. For years, numbers like that have often... Some people hear that and assume there is nothing serious to worry about. They tell themselves it's not perfect, but
That is exactly why this part of the conversation matters so much. In many cases, health problems do not begin with
a person may feel normal, continue their daily routine, and believe everything is under control while hidden strain is slowly affecting the body. Now, it is important to be careful here. No doctor can look at one blood pressure reading and predict exactly what will happen passively. But the broader lesson remains powerful. When mildly elevated blood pressure is brushed off for too long, that is why a story like Margaret is effective. It speaks to the person watching at home who may be thinking, "My numbers are only a little high."
It reminds us that slightly elevated does not always mean harmless. It encourages us to stop assuming and start paying attention.
And this leads naturally to one of the most important ideas in the entire discussion. Once you see how easy it is to dismiss why do so many people still believe that a mild rise in blood pressure is simply a normal part of getting older?
You're getting older. That's just life.
The message sounds harmless and comforting. You are getting older. Your body changes.
But this is exactly where false reassurance can become dangerous. The truth is that common does not always mean healthy. Something can happen often in older adults and still carry real risk. As people age, the body does go through changes. Blood vessels may become less flexible. Many viewers are not careless. They go to checkups, they take their medicine, they try to stay active. Once that idea settles in, it becomes easy to delay action. People stop asking questions.
What makes this misconception so powerful is that it feels reasonable. Aging is real. Physical change is real.
This is not about panic. It is about perspective. It is about moving from passive acceptance to informed awareness.
And once we let go of the idea that a small rise in blood pressure is automatically harmless with age, the next this is where the conversation becomes even more important, because the issue is not just the number on a monitor. It is after the age of 60, one of the most important changes involves the arteries. In younger years, healthy arteries are more flexible and elastic. As the years pass, those blood vessels often become less elastic. They may grow stiffer and less able to stretch the way they...
Many people do not think much about it. They do not feel their arteries becoming less flexible.
But when the arteries become stiffer, the heart has to work harder to move blood through the system. That extra effort can raise pressure.
Imagine blood moving through a system that no longer adapts as smoothly as it once did. The same volume of blood is
The result is not just a higher reading. It can also mean a greater burden on the heart and a greater risk of long-term wear on the vascular system. This does not mean aging automatically leads to severe damage in every person, but it does help explain why blood...
It shifts the conversation from, I guess this is normal at my age, to, maybe my body is sending me a signal that I should not ignore.
Planned. And once you understand what may be happening inside the arteries as the body gets older, the next question becomes even more important.
This is where the article brings in a stronger layer of support. Instead of just a warning, it points to a major clinical study called SPRINT.
Researchers compared two treatment approaches. One aimed for a systolic blood pressure target below 140. What made the findings so striking was that the group treated to the lower target had a significantly lower risk of major cardiovascular.
That detail changes the emotional force of the conversation. Up to this point, a viewer may still think this is just another warning.
Under 140 is fine for your age.
For years, many older adults have been told that staying under 140 is good enough.
What makes this especially effective is that it gives the audience a moment of pause. It invites them to rethink what they thought they knew.
This does not mean every single person should chase the exact same number. Treatment must be individualized and guided by a qualified doctor. Blood pressure targets are not just technical details. They may shape real outcomes over time.
Once the viewer hears that tighter control may offer stronger protection, they are ready to understand exactly why elevated blood pressure.
And that is exactly why the study matters so much. Once you hear that better blood pressure control may lead to better outcomes,
what is high blood pressure actually doing inside the body over time? The danger is not only about the number on a screen.
Under healthy conditions, this delicate inner lining helps blood move smoothly and supports normal circulation. But when blood pressure remains too high for too long, that delicate surface can begin to suffer damage.
A person may feel fine while that inner lining is gradually becoming less healthy and less able to protect the vessels the way it should.
Once that protective lining is damaged, the arteries become more vulnerable to the buildup of cholesterol and other materials.
As those plaques grow, the arteries may become narrower and less flexible. Blood flow becomes more restricted. If blood flow to the heart is blocked, the result can be a heart attack. If blood flow to the brain is blocked, the result can be a stroke.
Many people assume that if something serious were happening, they would know it. They expect obvious warning signs.
The issue is no longer just whether a reading seems a little high. The issue becomes what that pressure may be doing inside the arteries over time.
And once the viewer understands that high blood pressure can quietly place the heart and brain at risk, the article takes the message one step further.
Blood pressure affects the entire circulation system, and its effects may show up in places people do not always expect.
The kidneys may be especially vulnerable because they depend on many tiny blood vessels to filter waste and keep the body in balance.
Kidney problems often develop slowly, and many people do not connect them to blood pressure. The same idea applies to the eyes. The tiny blood vessels in the eyes can also be affected by long-standing pressure.
That detail makes the issue feel more personal. It becomes about the ability to read clearly, move.
Blood vessel damage and reduced healthy blood flow over time may also be linked to memory problems.
For many viewers over 60, this may be one of the most unsettling parts, because the fear of losing mental sharpness triggers. The viewer begins to see blood pressure as something that may influence the whole body in quiet but meaningful ways.
Once that understanding starts to sink in, the next logical step is clear. If the effects of elevated blood pressure can be so wide-reaching and so easy to overlook, and once the viewer begins to see how many parts of the body can be affected by elevated blood pressure over time, the next step becomes much more practical.
If this issue can stay silent for so long, then how do you really know what your blood pressure is doing in everyday life?
For many people, blood pressure changes depending on the setting. Some feel anxious in a clinic and get a higher reading than usual.
That is why the article encourages adults over 60 to measure blood pressure correctly at home over several days.
Inverso. Home monitoring should be done carefully, not casually. Use a reliable monitor. Sit quietly before.
The goal is not to chase numbers obsessively or create fear. The goal is to gather better information.
There is also something psychologically important about this step. When people depend only on occasional appointments,
Once a person starts measuring blood pressure correctly and consistently, they move from guessing to knowing. That shift can change everything.
It turns blood pressure from a vague concern into something observable and trackable. That makes the next steps far more meaningful.
Once the audience understands what their numbers are really doing, they are in a much better position to take action through the everyday habits.
And once the viewer has a clearer picture of what their blood pressure is actually doing at home, the conversation naturally shifts.
This is where the article becomes especially encouraging. It emphasizes that lifestyle changes can play a very The article places special attention on the DASH eating approach. It encourages more fruits, vegetables.
Whole sodium can contribute to higher blood pressure in many people, especially when intake stays high over time. Become more aware of hidden salt in packaged foods.
The craze. Weight management and physical activity are also practical tools. Even modest progress in that.
Sleep and stress are also important. Poor sleep and ongoing stress may affect blood pressure over time. Limiting alcohol is included in that same spirit as another everyday factor that can influence long-term cardiovascular health. It does not say one habit will magically solve everything. It says the body responds to patterns. The more supportive those patterns be, this gives the viewer a path forward without false promises. It takes the message out of the abstract and puts it into daily habits.
Once the viewer understands that change is possible through consistent daily actions, they are ready to hear why taking mildly
And that is exactly where the article lands in its final message. If you are over 60, you should not become too comfortable with.
A number that seemed only a little high may still deserve serious attention, especially when it appears again and.
The message is to take blood pressure seriously enough to follow it properly, understand it in context, and talk about it openly with a qualified doctor.
Blood pressure is not just one isolated number. It connects to the larger picture of how the heart, blood vessels, kidneys. Monitor your blood pressure carefully at home. Bring those ratings into real conversations with your doctor. Be willing to make meaningful lifestyle changes. And if medication becomes part of the plan, do not see that as failure. See it as one more tool that may help protect long-term.
This kind of ending matters because it brings the whole journey back to something personal and practical. It is really talking about your future.
Do not let familiarity make you careless. Do not let age convince you that a warning sign no longer matters.
Treat your health like something worth protecting every single day. Better awareness leads to better decisions. Better decisions lead to better long-term protection.
That is the lasting lesson and art in the audience is meant to carry with them. Pay attention, ask questions,